Hi everyone, I'm Rohit. I'm co-founder CEO of This.ai, a company I started about a year and a half ago. So we are an AI platform for sales and marketing teams to easily get information and insights from their enterprise data. But prior to This.ai, I started a company. I built a company called Swerve, which was an influencer marketing platform. So we started it in 2012. I think that was the time when influencer marketing just started to come up. And at Swerve, we built a comprehensive platform which actually had a network of influencers. So brands and agencies, they could actually find the right influencers. Then we had the complete workflow built where they could connect with influencers, interact with them, review their content before it goes live, and then payments and analytics. So it was one of the very few platforms, I would like to say that one of the very first platforms in the industry which would actually do end-to-end influencer marketing. So I ran that business for 4.5 years. We grew it nicely, and then we got acquired in early 2015. So stayed with the acquirer for a year, and then last year I just came out to start This.ai. So that's been my background. Thank you.
My name is José Tutiven. I'm known as Tutes. I am a photographer, videographer, and brand strategist at this point, lifestyle brand strategist. This is like my 5th year going into this entrepreneurship, so it's been a great transition between corporate life and into freelancing life for the last 5 years. So it's been very exciting with the change of technology, with the change of the business, and as well as like social media. I definitely started in the social media world as far as exploring and just showcasing my type of like creative abilities as far as like visually, and eventually got into a point where like the social media brands and agencies started to come up and started to hire me as an influencer as well as a photographer, videographer to create not only for my own content or my own feed, but also content for them and their company's feeds and brands and stuff like that. Eventually got into commercial work, and then now I'm doing pretty much a lot of video, and also now I'm doing a lot of consulting for a lot of up and coming brands, and as well as like established brands that want to create projects for authenticity and lifestyle, and projects that revolve around pretty much social media investment, I guess, if you want to say. Yeah. But pretty much that's where I'm at right now. It's been pretty cool. Prior to this, I was a full-time job. I used to work at IT. I used to be in 10 years. I went to school for it, and it was a nice little change of pace. Same creativity though, as far as like ambition and always wanting to take risks. But eventually, I just felt like photography was something that I felt really passionate about, and decided to give it my all and see where it can lead me. And excited to talk to you about it.
I'm Amanda Frankel. I'm the Associate Director of Investments at Stoic Capital. So we are a crypto and blockchain long-term strategic fund. And basically what I do there is I work on our early stage investment strategy. So anything from pre-product through seed rounds and Series A is kind of our area of expertise. And I guess, I'm just going to take the temperature of the room. How many of you say you're moderately knowledgeable about crypto and blockchain? Okay, cool. So our core investment thesis is around core technological improvements in the blockchain space, core financial use cases of blockchain. So prior to Stoic Capital, I actually worked at Credit Suisse for a number of years as a business relationship manager, and then as an account manager. And then the third thing, which kind of intersects the most with the influencer marketing, is anything with strong UX or UI. So anything that makes crypto or blockchain actually matter to people who aren't living their whole day in GitHub, building. Not to say that the building community isn't great, it's fantastic, but for real adoption, people need to understand it. And as a non-technical person myself, it would be nice if I didn't have to live in the Linux command line. So anything that makes this technology tangible for people is something that gets me really excited.
Fantastic. Thanks. So, I'll just sort of kick it off right away. Like Rohit, being sort of at the helm between sort of the different agencies, all the different constituencies in this ecosystem. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that influencer marketing and the industry is sort of faced with today?
Sure. We have seen influencer marketing growing in the last 6-7 years. And so 6 years ago, when we started influencer marketing platform, the biggest challenge in the industry was to find the right influencers, right? The activation itself was a big challenge, but over the years, the industry has grown, And we have seen that transition where now more and more brands, they are kind of familiar, at least with influencer marketing. A lot of agencies, they're already looking at influencers and making it like a core part of their strategy. But the industry still has like a lot of challenges, and I think there is a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs and even companies, to kind of create the right products which can help, elevate those challenges. So, for example, one of the biggest challenge which we felt was still on finding the right influencers even today, right? The information is still very fragmented. If you think about it, like today, if we want to hire somebody, you will probably go to LinkedIn and probably you can find everything about that person, which school he or she went to, the kind of background they have. But when you think about influencers, so that kind of profile doesn't work for influencer, right? The profile is, what is he or she is, what kind of content she is creating, what kind of engagement she gets on that kind of content, the topics and all that kind of stuff. I think there are still very few avenues where you can actually have a good set of influencers and you can see their profiles, right? So activation side, that is a big challenge that we see. The other challenge that we see is, which I found quite a bit, was somewhere in the middle. Like once you find an influencer, how do you work with that person, right? Like most of the times agencies and brands, they're on a tight timeline and they would say, hey, by this time we want to get the content out, right? And just that back and forth, if you're working with 30, 40, 50 influencers on a campaign, is a nightmare. It's a nightmare for both sides. I'm gonna say, don't get me wrong. I'm gonna say agency is struggling to keep everybody up to date and up to speed and get that content in. And while influencers, I would say, they're freelancers, they have other gigs and sometimes they don't even get the right instructions from the brand and what they need, right? So those kind of challenges also come in. And finally, I'm going to say, the payments side, there is no transparency in this market whatsoever today. If you want to hire a programmer tomorrow and you want, like, let's say a Java programmer, 4-year experience, you have a lot of data points, like what should be an hourly rate. I'm going to say, if somebody wants to hire him, more power to you.
Right.
You can charge anything, right? So one of the things that every time brands and agencies will ask, like, okay, so I have $20,000. What can I get from my $20,000, right? And we're like, it depends, right? So I think, every layer, and then analytics is a very, very different problem. Like that is another thing. I spent $20,000. Now what do I get for it? So I think the whole chain, although it is coming together, but it is still so inefficient that there is a lot of opportunity, challenges and opportunities, from end to end in influence marketing.
So now that we've sort of set the table in terms of some of the challenges that this space has, maybe I could open it up to Amanda or Tutes in terms of like the actual distributed ledgers and the ability for what this technology might be able to sort of provide as a solution to some of these challenges. Have you seen anything that you think is doing a really great job in addressing any of these things?
So I'll say that I haven't seen anything super specific in influencer marketing. I think the broader ad tech space in general has seen a lot of projects, whether it's content monetization, whether it's tipping, things like Steam It, for example, where people kind of get paid for content production. So there's stuff in the broader space. But I mean, just to kind of set the table for distributed ledgers, there are some things that blockchain is really good at, and then there's some things that blockchain is really bad at. So blockchain is good at providing, immutable ledgers of transactions. So if there's enough people on the network validating transactions, and there's not, enough bad actors in the system, i.e. 51% of people who can modify the ledger, then, it provides immutable proof. Depending on the scaling mechanism, it's poised to be faster than traditional transactions, or at least as fast in the future. It's not quite there yet. There's a lot of scaling things. But there are also some things that blockchain's really bad at. So if you put a lot of data on chain, you basically wind up with a slow, shitty database, right? And you might as well be using Amazon Web Services or some other internet data solution. Amazon Web Services is way too much of market share. I probably shouldn't use it as an example. But you have to be very pragmatic. And then there's other issues where, when people think of DLT, they think of Bitcoin, they think of completely public transactions. You can see everything that happens, but that's not necessarily a good thing. When you think of influencer marketing, you might want to know which brands other people are working with, but they don't want their entire contract to be in the public domain,
Sure.
because then people can very quickly deduce things like how much money you're making. Like that's a big risk in the cryptocurrency industry as a whole. Like the way the Bitcoin blockchain is set up, basically it's pseudonymous, not anonymous, and what that means is like it's an account number, but anybody who's good at data analysis can track it to your name. And so every time you send Bitcoin, it's basically like saying every time I write a check, you can see my entire checking account balance. And so when you think about something like sending money for the purposes of influencer marketing, companies that are paying influencers don't want people to know how much money they have in their account. They don't want to know the contract negotiation specifics. There's certain, you have to have selective privacy. And there are efforts to work on selective privacy in the crypto space, but I think it's important to set a baseline of, people love to say throw it on the blockchain as kind of this catch-all magical solution to make the entire world better. It's not. I invest in it, so I probably shouldn't say that, but there's a lot of things it's bad for. So you just have to kind of keep in mind, the good and the bad with every deal like that.
Are there any specific things, whether it be, transparency or, as far as like, digital rights management, maybe in terms of like, sort of like being able to establish provenance and sort of where things go? Like, are there certain applications where you see the potential? Like, obviously, blockchain is not a cure-all for all things, but are there certain things that really do stand out?
So intellectual property is like a really interesting thing, especially when you think about the influencer marketing space creating. I think a lot of brands want to see unique original content, right? But I'm not poised in the space, so please correct if I say something incorrect about it.
No, it's very true. It's how to like the whole business market that I'm in. It's all about like authenticity, creativity, and how to be unique and how to like stand off from all these other influencers that are doing can do pretty much the same thing, through via a phone or app or even like just like the software that's out there. One of the biggest problems that I have, I've learned to adapt with that because it's pretty much, we live in a world where it's like visually, what I call visual vomit. It's like constantly out there and you constantly comparing yourself. And as an agent, as somebody who have worked with companies and trying to see which person I want to work with, how do I compare that with somebody who can do it? And what type of experiences they have as far as like working with a brand, working with a company, working with just the occupation wise. But my concern is always, okay, along from that, what I come across is, okay, if we're going to use your images, how do I know that you're going to use it for the purpose that you said on the contract?
Right.
Like, you could literally use it, I won't know. And if I do find out, it'll be through somebody telling me, hey, I didn't know you used it for this. So one of the biggest struggles I have is like, okay, now it's communication, obviously, and trust and contract, but there's a lack of information and education between the people that are going from an influencer world into the actual business world as far as contracts. They don't know. They didn't go to school for that. It's for me, especially for me, it was a big struggle. I had to hire an agent to actually tell me, okay, what is the difference between licensing between like nationwide and worldwide? What is it that entails in that? And I think that if I don't know if that's that's definitely a solution that I would love to know if it can happen in the future. It's a lot of variables for sure when it comes to me as far as questioning. I get a lot of questions asking me. I get a lot of people asking me about like, hey, can we just use this image for this and that? I was like, okay. And it's so basic because they send you an email very broad, very simple, and you're just like, I need more, elaborate. It's like how much further do you need it for? It's I don't know if it's one of the biggest struggles for me as far as being in this industry.
There's definitely so I'm going to start with your point about
Sure.
the idea of like intellectual property, because I think that's really interesting. So there actually is, full disclosure, the company I'm about to name is a portfolio company of ours, but there's a company called the Rare Network that's working basically with a non-fungible token standard for digital art. And so something like that, where like you're providing an image and you say, hey, like I want to know that's being used for XYZ things, that can almost become a tracking mechanism, because the provenance of that art is readily available, as well as like you can potentially program in using something like a smart contract restrictions for what it can and can't be used for. But anything in blockchain is still, there's still real world limitations, right? Like there's always going to be a person manually putting in data somewhere. Blockchain can't fix that, but it can help fix some of the intermediaries. So the idea of knowing who's using your content, and then coming back to the influencer marketing side, you could use a smart contract to do something like, hey, you're paying someone to promote, I don't know, let's say you're a cover girl, you're paying me to promote your lipstick.
Sure.
we could enter into a smart contract and send funds to escrow, which means they're held, like we could have funds held in the smart contract that say if these 3 conditions are met, like if I post the content, if both of us say yes, the contract was fulfilled, then money is released. That's a very simplistic example because then, if we disagree, then there has to be some sort of arbitration mechanism. But things like just holding funds until conditions are met, that's something that could potentially be very useful.
Yeah.
And there's something, and the way that you can check if conditions are met, there's a way that a smart contract can interact with external data through something called an oracle. So there's a project called Augur that's actually, it's decentralized prediction markets. So basically, this will come back to influencer marketing in a second, but basically like we can both bet on the outcome of like the next presidential election, but how does Augur as a system know who won that bet? It has to get that third-party data from somewhere, and it has to get it from outside of the system or the chain or the DApp it's working within. And it's something called an oracle, which is a way to pull in third-party data to validate an outcome. And so there you can say, okay, well, what if the third-party data is accurate? There are, but that's an issue people face with every system. But it's a more automated and kind of streamlined way to say, if X happens, then Y and Z will happen too. And you have kind of a process around the way money flows, the way contracts are managed. So you could do something like, hey, if I'm CoverGirl and I think CoverGirl and Rimmel are owned by the same company, but let's say like if I'm CoverGirl and someone else is Rimmel London, and I say, hey, as Rimmel, I don't want to work with a company if they've worked with CoverGirl. You could maybe pull in third-party data and say, and automatically rule out all influencers if they have CoverGirl mentioned on their YouTube channel, like by pulling in data from, I guess, like YouTube's APIs. Again, don't know if YouTube offers that data. But there's a lot of different and interesting ways you could use smart contracts to provide kind of selective functionality around like what kind of data you're taking in.
That's what I thought. I thought that would be a very interesting application for influencer marketing. So for example, going back to your point, the profile of an influencer, what he or she has been doing, which brands she has worked with, what kind of content she has created.
How authentic is it?
Exactly. Right now that information is either not available in public or it is very siloed. So for example, at my company, when we had the platform, Activate is the name of the platform now. If you go there are about 300,000 influencers on the platform. So the first thing is that we create profile, and a user can actually very actively manage his or her profile, right? But the thing is that influencers like you can actually get a gig from us, and then you can get a gig from somebody else, and even standalone one-on-one through your agent, right? How does all that information comes together in one profile? Like, what have you worked with? So that's what I thought. Like, blockchain could be where it's immutable and then it is public. If it is not controlled by one entity, then you can actually, hopefully, you can create one true profile, which basically pulls all that information, and it is right there. And that if it is there, then it is correct information about that influencer.
So I definitely agree in theory that would be fantastic, but then the decentralization piece is what's interesting, is because who is securing that network to prove that information is correct?
Right.
And I think that I think everyone has heard a lot of stories about like the ICO boom of last year, people raising a lot of money for utility tokens for siloed networks. And so the 2017 answer to that is, we'll just put in a utility token. It's an economic incentive for people to manage the network. So I personally I'm not a big believer in the utility token thesis. Because if you think of a company, like again, go back to my CoverGirl example, you can't tell CoverGirl, hey, I want you to go buy ETH, transfer that ETH to Binance. I want you to buy my utility token, and now you can participate in my network to get influencer profiles. That's way too many degrees of separation, and people just want to immediately access that information. So there's always trade-offs, right?
Right.
And I mean, you don't necessarily have to do a utility token. If you build a DApp on Ethereum, or I guess people are building stuff on Hashgraph or EOS or Definity or like a number of other projects, you could potentially use the native token, but then it's like, is the act of using crypto too far for many of these companies at this stage today? I would say it probably is.
It may be, but I think if I see like a few years down the line, I would say what PayPal is today to these networks, it could be like ETH or any of the utility tokens, going down the line. So what happens today is like, most of these platforms, they have payments built. So an influencer will submit her content, brand will look at it, brand will approve. The moment they approve, then the payment is dispersed automatically to the influencer, right? But think about it, so instead of PayPal, if there is a distributed kind of mechanism, and an influencer goes and says, this is what I want, to be paid. I don't want to be paid by PayPal because I lose whatever 7%, 8%. I want to be paid through this channel. And now influencer networks, they start offering that as a payment channel, then that problem is solved. Because CoverGirl will go to somebody and say, okay, you are running our influencer marketing campaign, and that entity is basically dispersing money, or in this case tokens. So that way it can be solved. But yes, today it is not mainstream.
Because there has to be a critical mass of people who
exactly.
are, most of the people, especially the prominent ones, have to say, no, I want to get paid in Bitcoin before somebody is really willing
right.
to make a change.
Yeah.
And then that solves the payment problem, but then there's also the decentralized identity problem. It's kind of like there's two different theses here, right? Like there's the decentralized management of information, and then there's the transaction side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
it's like, do those need to exist in the same system? If they do, what does that look like? Like
right.
I don't have any answers. I'm asking all the questions.
Yeah. I'm sure if Bitcoin goes back to $20,000 again, a lot of people will start getting it.
If Bitcoin goes back to $20,000, you guys will see me in the Florida Keys doing a vacation. I'm just kidding. I'll still be working all the time.
to sort of piggyback on that idea of decentralization and sort of like maybe you guys could talk a little bit about the private, the use of both private and public blockchains, right? I think in theory, sort of decentralized ledgers and then sort of complete transparency are an amazing thing when it comes to things like payment and even the history, right?
Yep.
The history of interactions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's not. I think there's cases to be made for both, right? So if you guys could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, I think in my mind, the positive of a decentralized kind of app being public is that a lot of influencer information is out in public, right? When you create content, it's out in public, right? You're not hiding it from people. You're never saying that, I don't want people to see my content. In fact, you're doing the reverse,
no,
right?
You want to publish it, yeah.
Yeah. So in that sense, I think hopefully, this is my hope, that the barrier to my information being out in public and being accessed by everybody is probably very low in influencer marketing, right? So that's what we can piggyback on for profiles, even for, I would say, analytics, like what is happening on that particular piece of content, how many people are viewing it, and nobody is actually going and tomorrow just altering that number, right? I can't even tell you how many times that happened to us, right? Where a piece of content goes live, then we start actually collecting all the analytics because we have to report it back to the brand, what happened. And then suddenly something happens. Either that number goes up abruptly or that number goes down, and that always creates a headache, right? Because brand wants to know what did they get for their money. So I think that kind of information is probably what the public aspect of it. Private, I'm not too sure of. I think because the moment we start going towards like private kind of blockchain, I think we are basically going back to the same thing, like a private network, like what we created, where all information basically belongs to us, and every network wants to do that. But I don't think that is necessarily good for influencer, because they want their information to be out in public, most of it, and then even for the brand. So I'm not too sure about that aspect of blockchain yet.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been pretty vocal about this in general, and I would love to be proven wrong, but I just believe that if you're going to create a private blockchain, again, just use a database platform. Yeah. It'll be cheaper, it'll be faster, and I mean, look, like if you lower the number of nodes on the network, as in the number of people mining to secure the network, if it's proof of work, if there's fewer people on the network, if there's fewer nodes, like yes, transactions can move more quickly because consensus can be reached more quickly, but like also people. Like if there's fewer nodes on the network and you create a private situation, there's always opportunities for collusion. And I like my tinfoil hat inner cypherpunk says that that's bad, and I don't like that. But I mean, actually, I want to get back to the thing you said about making everyone's information public, right? Because like, let's build. Like, can we build this network like live? Like, I want to think about this. So like, if we're thinking about the idea of a public network where all of your data profile as an influencer, that's all public, right? So one of the biggest things about distributed ledger is consensus. Like you have to achieve consensus. So in this like happy network where everyone's data profile is there, how do you achieve consensus around individual pieces of information are correct? Like do people achieve consensus through manual validation and submission to the network, which arguably is the most accurate way, but incredibly inefficient? Do you have people who validate the network by simply time-stamping that, and people are de facto required to be honest because if they told a lie, it's been time-stamped and now everybody knows and you can't remove it from the ledger? Is it people validate the different data feeds? So for example, again, I don't know if YouTube's API is public. I'm not a developer. Like, is it people who validate that like the data is being pulled from YouTube's API and not being doctored by a third party? Like, which parts of the network do we want people to secure?
Sure.
And I mean, I believe that by nature of making something immutable, like if you have the ability to literally like go through, like with Etherscan, like you can go back and be like, no, you sent me that ETH, like I know that I have it. You know, if you can go back and say, hey, you said it was 20 million views, now you're trying to say 15 million, like someone's lying here. Just having that amount of data can be helpful. But, like,
Right.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, well, anytime I work on, like I've worked with in past experiences with influencers, the biggest struggle is, okay, you got 24 hours to submit how much the analytics are. What is that, how many views you got, how many likes you got? And it's always strangeful for me. I'm like, I don't know. I got to go back, and sometimes you pass those 24-hour mark, and now it's like, I don't know. I literally lost that information. I don't know how to get back to you. Maybe I'll find it, maybe I won't. Or maybe I logged off by mistake. You know, it's like you're basing it on a platform that provides that type of information, and I struggle with that a lot. I'm like, that's why sometimes I'm like, I don't want to be influencer. I just want to actually just shoot content for you and just like let you worry about that. I don't want to worry about my platform because then I can create. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of issues with that because that's the only way they know if I'm doing it. And I feel kind of bad because then I'm inefficient, right? And then I fall in a place where, you know, these clients, they're paying me to provide this information for them eventually. I don't know if it's because they want to use me again or maybe because they don't know if it was and again, the end of the day is ROI, right? Mm-hmm. Return on investment. How much was it worth it at the end of the day? And if I can't provide the information that they wanted or at all, then I feel like I'm inadequate in some sort of, and that makes me want to say, like, I did my job technically, but how do I prove it? How do I prove it that I was the right person for you? Or for the client, or for this, or for this particular project. So those are little elements like that that I feel like would help me alleviate to them like in a very like easy way, at least, you know.
Sure. Yeah, and that is basically related to analytics. But going back to your point, right? Like, if an influencer has, let's say, an Instagram profile or a Facebook profile or a YouTube profile, the following information, the content pieces that she has created, you know, at least on social networks, you can actually pull that information, how many likes, how many, you know, views they got on that, right? Like all that information is out there in public, and most of these channels, they have APIs available, right? So in your consensus network, I mean, so those machines, they can actually go and pull that information and can say, yeah, we vote that, you know, this information is correct. And that's how you get 51% and boom, you know, now that is basically memorialized on the chain that, okay, this is what, you know, this is what it was like 2 months ago. And now think about it, that, you know, one of the important aspects for influencers when a brand is looking at an influencer is how fast he or she is growing, her, you know, social network interaction and all that kind of stuff. Now it could be beautiful. I'm gonna say if we can create a profile like that, like, hey, you know, Tutes he was like I'm making it up, like 50,000 followers, you know, a year ago, and now he's sitting at 500,000 followers, and look, this is the growth. Honestly, you know, a lot of brands will put a lot of stock in that and would want to work with him, that, you know, he's doing great. So something like that, if you can build, you can memorialize all these steps on the chain, and we can build a profile like that, that's valuable. That's super valuable in surfacing like who is doing well, in which industry, what kind of content, what channel. A lot of brands will actually, you know, go for that.
How would we deal with like sorry, I'm like hijacking.
No, please.
How would we deal with the idea of influencers consenting or not consenting to like profiles being created for them? Because like you say, like a lot of this data is publicly available. Like for crypto projects, there's a website called CoinGecko that polls various social media indicators, like people who are active in a subreddit, the number of like Twitter followers. Like you can track this information.
Yep.
So like, do you imagine the system starting just to create profiles for influencers kind of on its own because de facto because it's pulling like all of these like large quantities of data, and then it's up to the influencer to kind of interact with the system and correct as necessary? Like,
I think so. Yeah, I think that totally makes sense.
It's terrifying that like I don't know, like I wouldn't want to go online and see like a giant profile about me and like all my Twitter things. I tweet like once every 2 months. Like,
no, but that's because you know, you're not thinking like an influencer.
That's true.
Right? So yeah. Would you go and, let's say if you tomorrow get promoted or you change your job, what is the first thing you will do on social media? Which social network you will go to and update that information? LinkedIn. right?
Yeah.
Because you're not hiding that information. It's totally in your incentive that you go and publish that information. So the same thing with an influencer. If I got from 20,000 to 50,000 followers, I want the whole world to know that I now have 50,000 influencers. Hey, brands come and give me money, right? Yeah, it's a different thing when you go down from like 10,000 to 2,000. That's a very different thing. Yeah, that's when you won't like that.
Well,
yeah.
but that's now available.
But hey.
in this like network we've created, that's now available too.
Yeah.
Which I guess is good for the businesses.
But the thing is, the flip side to that is, it's not that influencer can actually hide that thing. If you went down from 10,000 Twitter followers to 2,000, anybody can see it. You cannot hide it, and you don't even own that information. I mean, so as long as your profile is public, anybody can go and see it. So not that I'm going to say that's why I see that there is no big barrier to that. Like, oh no, this is not your credit card, this is not your bank account. You don't want to put out there in public. This is something which most of the time you want to share. So yeah.
But I think all of this comes back to sort of the fundamental question of like what decentralized ledgers can offer, and sort of the ability or inability, for that matter, to the inability to change, right, certain things, or even opt in, for example. If you're having profiles that are spun up, if your LinkedIn profile, so to use your CoinGecko example, they're profiling coins and projects, but then they're taking sentiment information from Twitter and from development information from GitHub. They're pulling all these other data points and essentially putting them together and associating with a profile that they've created, right? So it's a really interesting thing to sort of see where it goes. Where do you guys think we're going in terms of that ability, right? Like, are we headed toward this dystopian future where everything and anything that we do is always going to be sort of logged into a ledger or a block of amber forever? Or I don't know, like do you guys have any high level benefits, or like do the benefits outweigh the sort of the potential pitfalls? Do you guys have a
Yeah, I'll give you entrepreneur's perspective, and you have a VC perspective, so you may not agree with me. But I think blockchain as a technology is pretty interesting, and it has some good use cases. But I don't think blockchain is like internet kind of technology. I would say, a lot of people will say, oh, it'll change the world, like internet changed the world in the last 25 years. I think wherever it'll have impact, it'll have a very deep and big impact. But it is not like the all kind of technology in my mind. So going back to your point, I think there are very specific areas where I see blockchain can help a lot, but then there are a lot of areas where I don't think blockchain is the right technology, right? So, yeah, that's my perspective here.
Okay.
Well, I disagree.
Of course.
But, well, I mean, look, it's like the same way I say that, like, you can't just throw everything on the blockchain. It's like, I guess like you throw enough shit at the wall, like something's gonna stick. But no, I don't think everything should be on the blockchain. But I think that there's a lot of deep ramifications that technology will have. So like the idea, so I worked at Credit Suisse. I actually started at Credit Suisse in a back office role. I was sort of glorified data monkey. And the idea that my job that I did for 2.5 years of my life would not exist if blockchain technology had better trade settlement. So like people talk about security tokens and all that kind of stuff, but there's very real efficiency implications that I think could fundamentally shift kind of the way our society operates. So while you say, okay, blockchain might not be the best for every single industry, if you think of the large number of jobs that it could potentially displace as an efficiency mechanism, I think that we're looking, I would say, we have the agricultural revolution, everybody becomes sedentary, we have an industrial revolution, and then we kind of have like I don't know what the term is for like the internet revolution, but there's all these different rounds of efficiencies. And if you think of the idea that at Credit Suisse 50% of their people work in back office, and that maybe that 50%, which is 24,000 people, can be reduced to 100 developers, that's a significant hit. And there's a lot of institutions that rely on very manual back office processes.
Sure. Yeah.
Can have a lot of efficiency, and I think that'll have a significant economic impact. So in the way, maybe not in the way that everyone has a website, but I think that there's going to be a lot that will be felt. But then on the flip side, it's like there's a lot of like that I don't think that's going to happen tomorrow. There's a lot of building that needs to be done. We saw this kind of big frenzy last year where everybody's like, throw it on a blockchain, let's do utility tokens. A bunch of people made a lot of money off of that and think they're great investors now, but now you see, okay, wait a second, let's dial it back. There's core infrastructure we don't have. There's like custody of tokens, like the fact that people are trading like all of these tokens around, and people don't know actually how to secure these things that they've put a lot of their money into is kind of terrifying. And then there's also like the blockchain technology side. So I mean, I'm one of those people who reinvest in crypto. So for me, like crypto and blockchain are inherently entangled. And I know that there's a lot of institutional, blockchain, not Bitcoin people. I believe that they're inherently entangled, so the development will kind of come together. But there's just a lot of places the technology just hasn't had enough like time to iterate and really start to dig into where it can be most useful.
I'm just happy that Tutes, your business is not going anywhere. Blockchain cannot.
I don't know.
Cannot replace you.
I mean, as far as like the manual labor, maybe the technology is advancing.
Well, as long as you're producing great content.
I mean,
you're
it's
safe,
gonna come to a point where the technology is gonna give you all the information. It's not even gonna be posting anything. It's just gonna be connected to the technology. The technology is gonna just automatically put it somewhere in the net without even like you. It's gonna be automated.
I feel like that's a Black Mirror episode.
But that's the way I see it. I think it's just gonna lead to the point where it's just gonna be either you're gonna be two extremes. You're either gonna have you want to be disconnected from the world. You're just gonna shoot analog. You're just gonna shoot like film cameras where there's nothing technologically advanced, or you're gonna have something that's just hyperly just like literally you wink an eye and it takes a shot for you type of thing.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people talk about the technology and sort of the success predicated on the fact that it needs to be adopted. Can you talk a little bit about like maybe some of the so going back to an old question, but like what are some of the immediate things in your field that you think, oh, you know what, whether it's being able to source your own deals, right? Whether it's tracing provenance and IP, or even being able to get paid for your work. Like what are some of the things that you wish or you could see the technology providing?
Well, one of the technologies, obviously, I think for me, it's contracts. That's one of the biggest keys. It's always a struggle trying to like put it all in words and lettering as far as like how to get to that. Like make sure we both meet the right needs.
Okay.
That's one thing for me. Once we pass that, then it goes to the actual execution. But obviously, payment is always going to be an issue. I mean, it's been an issue so far. It's always back and forth with W-2 forms. Oh, that's the incorrect invoice. Oh, can you just fix that? Oh, can you fix this little update? It's just delay of payment when the concept of like they need immediate results.
Yeah.
You expressed earlier that like okay, this is a 2-week turnaround type of concept. We need these images, blah blah blah. I'm like, all right, and one of the solutions is like just invoice us now, so that way we can get you paid a lot sooner. I'm like, well, why can't you just send me like money right now once I deliver the images? Little things like that. It becomes and it goes to a point where they just disappear, and you have to follow up, and it's just annoying. And you have other things you want to worry about. That's why a lot of people have agents. It's like let the agent deal with that, and then you get my check. Sure. But now you're your own agent. You're your own, not just a photographer. Now you're a creative director. You're a producer. You're pretty much pulling all these different type of elements. You're putting in position all these different hats because they can't afford it or they don't know what they're doing. They expect you to do it. As far as technology has to go, it's advanced to a point where it's just everything is fast and cheap. That's the way I see it. It's the results is they're not looking for, as far as for me, it's they're not looking for good, and anything that's good is gonna be expensive. That's the way I see it. And right now, because you're competing with pretty much everyone who has a phone or everyone who has a affordable camera, you pretty much have to compete with those, and you have to deal with this whole market where you have to devalue yourself to stay competitive, and it's kind of sucks. So, I mean, I don't know if that's answering the question as far as like technology, but it's you have to adapt to it. You have to kind of like see how that can benefit you, but at the same time, how to not lose your identity and your value in it. So my way has always been trying to stay challenged and try to stay motivated and try to create new things that brands will find appealing that they'll use me for, instead of doing the whole traditional, like very like what works for the platform itself or what's viewable. There's a lot of platforms out there. There's a lot of like apps that people use that automates everything, and you're competing with that. When you say like my job is it's secure. It's hard to define that. How secure?
I think creativity is
always going to be there, for sure. But how? A lot of people don't. I know a lot of photographers that get very discouraged because now it's a constant battle with technology. As technology advances so much, and as it becomes smaller and more compact and more usable and more user friendly, I think is one of the keynotes is now you have to compete with that instead of somebody who just went to school for like 4 years. And,
Sure.
You know, it's I think technology it's one of those double-edged swords. You either accept it and adapt to it, or
Yeah, I mean, an immediate thing that comes to mind is like, the market might not dictate sort of the same thing, but the market might be bigger.
Sure.
And even when you deal with the technology and just the ability to cut out the intermediary, for example, you're going to be able to create. I mean, in theory, you'd be able to create and capture more of that value.
I
for
will say
yourself,
this:
right?
it has put me to a point where it's just more direct contact with the client.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure in the past it hasn't been that easy.
Yeah.
You know, now it's more about like send me a DM, they send me a message, and like, hey, I work with such and such.
Yeah.
She liked your stuff. Let's go. And I'm like, okay, let's get a contact, get a coffee or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, literally everything's done through like as simple as possible without no mediation, which
Sure.
is pretty excited, pretty impressive. I must
Right.
say that. That's pretty impressive.
Right.
What happens if somebody doesn't pay you though? Then you like.
Yeah.
Well, that's I've encountered that problem where they delay their process and going back and forth, and I've actually had to for 6 months going back and forth on showing them contracts. And the reason that happened is because the person that I was working with left the company,
Yeah,
Oh.
exactly.
and it was a big issue in working with the new person. And I actually had to, because I wanted to just forget about it, I just said, look, just give me half the money. Let me call it even. I mean, what can you do after that? It's going back and forth. I mean, I was fairly young. Now I know to take other proper measures,
Yeah.
but you're right. What if that's still something that can happen? That's still something where, like, let's say I write a contract, I can use that to, you know, take legal actions if I wanted to. That's what I usually rely on that actual contract signature saying you got to pay me such and such at such and such time. If not, you know, whatever happens. But yeah, then you got to go into legal battle with somebody who probably, depending on how big the check is going to be probably more legal money than the actual, you know, payment. So it's always a concern for me for sure.
That's actually one of the big challenges of influencer marketing business as
Yeah,
such, like
yeah,
beyond
yeah,
technology,
100%, yeah.
because we were always in that constant battle. If you go and you work with P&G, they're gonna say that our net payment terms are 120 days.
Yes.
And you're like,
I've
oh,
had that.
120 days, and they're like, yeah, but we want all of our content to be in 30 days.
Yeah.
So we're like,
That doesn't seem fair.
Yeah.
and then you go back to influencers and you're saying, oh, okay, I want your content in 30 days. By the way, I'll pay you in 120 days. So influencers will say, no, that doesn't make sense. I delivered my stuff and I should be paid,
you should
right?
be compensated.
So yeah, that's a big challenge for networks, influencer marketing networks and agencies, how to manage that cash flow kind of situation, because money is going out first and then it's coming in later.
There have been some agencies that pay you right on the spot, though.
Yeah, no, we used to pay like right on the spot. Like the moment your content is in and brand approves it, you get automatically paid.
PayPal or a
Yeah,
check, literally.
yeah, both. I'm
As,
gonna say,
as
you know,
someone that
PayPal.
sits sort of at the intersection between the vendors, the brands, the influencers themselves, do you think that intuitively that blockchain would tackle one of those issues first? Like, is it more with the creator? Is it more with the brand? And when you're talking about clearing and like, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there an emphasis in your mind?
I don't think blockchain. Maybe I can't think of that scenario, but I don't think blockchain can help get money from brands first. But you know, payment is that part can be very easily maintained, right? Like, or managed with blockchain. I think it's probably even better. So, like today, like most of the solutions in the industry, they work on PayPal. So you know, you have built a workflow on top of it where, like we did that, where influencer sends the content goes live, and brand approves it. And the moment brand approves it, you know, on that day or one day that particular week, all the payments are cleared.
Okay.
Right. So I think that part probably can be done by blockchain, and probably even in a better fashion, right? But getting money from brands is a totally
Okay.
different problem.
How about you, Amanda? On the adoption side, as someone that evaluates sort of all of these projects, where do you see sort of the most promise?
So I would say for that specific application, like maybe smart contracts would be useful, but so I mean for the influencer marketing industry as a whole, just like to be clear, it's not something like I don't even have an Instagram personally. I probably shouldn't say that on this panel, but so with the caveat that I don't fully understand the industry, I don't even know if you need it. And I don't know if I should say that, but like to play the devil's advocate here, there are things like Upwork where there's escrow-based payments. So if I want to pay someone to design my website, I have to send the money first. And I mean, yes, there is still an approval mechanism, but those funds are there and they're held, so at least the person working for me knows that that money is there before they start on a milestone. And it's like that system works pretty well. I mean, there is the trusted intermediary through Upwork, and I don't know what cut Upwork is taking. So there's like that issue too, but you know, you don't necessarily need blockchain to do escrow-based payments. I think that smart contracts are an effective way to do it. But then the problem with smart contracts is smart contracts are based on like if-then logic. So like if I do the work and I submit it, then money gets released. If I don't do the work, money doesn't get released. But the problem is you create these logic trees and you can't branch out every single thing that's going to happen, right? And there is this wallet called Parity, which is an Ethereum wallet that basically the one like if in the logic tree they didn't cover was like if someone loads the entire smart contract as a wallet. So like someone could basically loaded this whole smart contract and basically typed in like a kill command and basically like locked up a whole lot of ether. And that was like a well-known event that happened in the cryptocurrency community. So even when you're building these smart contracts with really experienced developers who know what they're doing, you can't cover every single if-then logic. For something very simple, like contracts-wise, where it's like you only really 3 conditions need to get met, that's much less complex and much easier to kind of build a system around. But as things get more complex for like longer-term contracts, different types of content, different approval mechanisms, like there's, you know, the bigger you make something, you're always creating more places for there to be errors. So it's just, you have to be very careful.
Yeah, great. So I think we're at a good place now where we can open up sort of the forum for any questions that the group might have, and then we'll sort of take it from there. Does anyone have any questions? Please.
The question is how does the blockchain help influencers with their messaging? So let's say this is 10 years ago, and I'm an expert in something, whether it's shoe design or for some shoe company to lay off or some campaigns. And you start off, okay, I'll do a blog. And then I might just do YouTube videos. And then I'll take advantage of social media platforms. What does blockchain do for somebody like that? Because the stuff you're talking about is useful across the board to all businesses, to anybody doing anything. But what would blockchain do in terms of helping you enhance your messaging as an influencer? Like in terms of validation for third parties, that type of stuff.
Yeah, I can take that. So basically that's where we were talking about the profiles, right? Like creating a profile to kind of elevate you in the industry and showcase your skill set and what you have done, right? Today there is no one centralized place where you can actually go and create that profile and everybody will have access to that, right? So you can go to Activate, which is our company, and you can have a profile there, but not everybody knows Activate, right? So the idea is, like, one of the ideas we were discussing was, can there be a public blockchain, you know, which basically collects all this information and it is out in public, it's immutable. So if you created a piece of content, it basically records that and it goes on your profile. So it's public, it's basically not owned by one particular company like Activate or Maker Studio or anybody else, right? And you own that profile, that is basically your profile. So anybody can find you on that blockchain, I'm assuming, and you can also send your profile to anybody. Like, this is my neutral profile and it has all my work history, what I have done so far, and you can see all my metrics right here, you know, and that's how they can actually kind of make a decision whether they want to work with you as an influencer or not. So that's what we were thinking, right?
Yeah, I think the interoperability of like the profile, you know, that's still, you know, the jury's still out in terms of like how effective that's going to be. But I mean, even in the case of like if you're creating something and you can have, you know, we talk about art and IP and provenance. Like even if your history or your experience could be sort of validated, I would think that if you're a craftsman working on whatever it is that you are, whether it's a campaign or an actual product or anything like that, I think having that sort of validation in that profile that's immutable, I think that would actually help you, right? And that would help in the case of like an artisan. That would also help in the case of a consumer even, right? Like if you're, I've read a lot of stuff about like, you know, profiles, not only in the case of trying to get work, but even in the case of a consumer. Like, you know, imagine your Airbnb profile I mean, I guess this could be really good and really bad, but imagine that being immutable and sort of being sort of interconnected with your Uber profile, with all these things that are currently sort of centralized in these individual silos. Can you imagine if there was interoperability and a transparency that sort of followed through, right? There could be an added layer of value that you could also bring to the vendor or the company, but also to yourself. Yeah.
I kind of like the Airbnb example because I've definitely booked a California King private bedroom and turned up and it was like some creepy dude's couch. So, yeah, I'm definitely on. To be clear, I am not endorsing any specific decentralized Airbnb projects. There are several out there vying for that market, but immutability for that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I got my money back, but
I was actually going to ask on that topic, while this your influence comes through these platforms, decentralized, for example, do you think about the future of the platform on which influencers post their content, share their content?
I always do. I always, the way I guess that's more the artistic side, the artist in me. It's like, I'm constantly gonna shoot, but I'm not gonna always base it on just put like that whole concept, put all my eggs in one basket. And you have to kind of like, I have a LinkedIn account because I want to produce more of a professional level type of, audience. And then you have your Facebook, and you have your Instagram, and you have your YouTube. But eventually what's gonna happen for me is like, I want people to still hire me even if the platform disappears, right? Ultimately, I still want to do what I'm still doing. So I guess part of me is what happens when all this disappears. Do we go back to just the Stone Age? It's just like resumes,
Do you put any of your just curious? Do you put any of your content on the decentralized platforms like Steam or any of these like Steam there?
No.
Okay.
nobody actually is using any of those.
No.
So no. So that wasn't a dig at a specific project. Like if you look at DApp usage, which is a thing you can do, like there's like 6 decentralized applications that have more than 30 users. Like that's a fact. Like they're a month, yeah. But I mean, like,
why is that?
Well, so a lot of this stuff isn't usable. Like a lot of these projects are built around network effects. Like once you get critical mass, everyone likes it. But I mean, even like look at CryptoKitties. So CryptoKitties was so popular that it nearly shut down like the Ethereum blockchain. And there's under 100 people actively trading CryptoKitties a month now. I do have.
At a peak, it was like 1,200 or 1,400.
Yeah, that's not that many people to crash it, like the Ethereum network.
100 is transactions. It's not really kind of like people who are watching the crypto business. It's like most of people who are watching them kind of like doing it somewhere. It's big. It's just transaction where they buy and sell it. We see on the tab. So it's like kind of like different picture.
Yeah.
Like websites can be like 1 million people, but just 100 transactions like on the blockchain.
Yeah, and a lot of people buying and selling these ERC20 tokens. It's speculative, right? There are very few applications where people are actually interacting with the networks in a truly meaningful way. I mean, and that's just like when we talk about this as a specific example. This is one of the use cases where I take a step back and say, well, what infrastructure needs to be built for people to want to interact with these platforms and be able to determine whether these platforms need to exist or whether we're perfectly fine doing things, like through Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever platforms people are using. So I think we just have to take a step back and say, wow, this industry is really early. People are still trying to figure out how to custody tokens. People are still trying to decide if utility tokens are a thing that should exist or not. If you want to hear like a really ugly rant with a lot of swear words about utility tokens, talk to me privately after this. But people are still trying to decide like what needs to exist in the system. And I think we get so excited about crypto because it's really cool and the technology is fascinating, but we've only been doing it for 10 years. Like in the grand scheme of human advancement, that is a very short period of time. Even though things move with a high velocity, like we gotta take a step back and say, like, do we have the tools we need for these networks to even run properly? If there's, under 10 decentralized applications that are actively being used, I would say that we need to be a little introspective about the foundation of a lot of this stuff and see like where it needs improvements. But
I think philosophically, if you think about, how things in technology they take off. So there are 2 different concepts, right? Like on one hand, we talk about apps, and they are on a very different trajectory. Like, Instagram can reach like 1 billion users in a couple of years, right, or a few years, right? That is an application, but technology adoption is a very different kind of gig, right? Like databases, or for that matter, like now Java and then Angular and all these kind of technologies, they were on a very different path, right? So in my mind, I don't know why, but I always think about blockchain on the technology path, like where it has to mature, and then more and more developers have to adopt it to build their applications on top of blockchain technology. So I think there is some sort of confusion sometimes. We think like, oh no, blockchain should actually should be on an application kind of path and should reach like billions of people and very quickly. Maybe Bitcoin kind of in last 2 years moved the needle, and a lot of people started expecting that. But otherwise, I think of blockchain as more like technology, and we need to basically get more developers building cool apps on this technology, right?
I think the thing with influencers is like the only way to get jobs is by continue being influencers, right? And whatever platform comes. So if a new platform comes, it's like, okay, I gotta start over.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
how do you just fast forward to the point
Right.
where you just like you have all the instant information, whatever the public profile you're
Right.
talking about, and just like load it up into the new platforms or new software or apps that come in and be like, okay, you have a lot of history in influencing or whatever all these applications. Let's just load up into this new platform. Voila. This is how many, like it would be nice if that's possible. That would be great, because any new platform that comes along or program, you're just gonna have to start from scratch all over again and kind of get all your audiences and awareness, like, hey, I'm on this platform now.
Come follow me here.
Come follow me here so I can see what this is all about. And it's kind of, for me, it's annoying. I'm not somebody that wants to like constantly, drag people to follow me everywhere I go. It's more about like, see if this platform is fitting for me and moving forward, or maybe this is the new Instagram. And we'll see what happens. I don't know.
Do you just like make? I totally am curious now. Like, do you just make new profiles in every like social media thing that reaches a certain number of users just in case it's popular?
I do it to secure my name.
Yeah.
So
because like when I was making my Twitter 3 months ago, because that's the kind of person I am. Like all of my name was taken, and there's like not that many Amanda Frankels out there, but apparently like all of them are on Twitter before me, since like I couldn't get a username. So.
Well, there was what was the application that went really crazy within a month?
Meerkat.
Which one? No. Vero, yes.
Right.
Vero went crazy. I mean, it went to a point where people were just like seeing this is the new version of Instagram or whatever. And I think that went viral because of the way that it was marketed. The guys pretty much said for the first, 1 million followers or 1 million accounts are free for a lifetime. So it was just like everybody signed up because they wanted to have a free account.
Because we're sheeple.
And people started going crazy over it, and because they were saying like this is going to be a new one. But I mean that was literally like a month, and then you never heard of it again. It's I guess that's the influencer mentality, that you want to be ahead of the game as soon as possible. And that's where, if a new platform comes into play, you're just like, okay, how can I make this get verified or get X amount of followers, so that way I can have opportunity here if that becomes the next best thing. Because we've learned from Instagram or from YouTube or from even Facebook, it's like the more followers you get, the more more opportunities and maybe more money-driven.
It's a positive feedback loop.
Yeah. I don't want to say positive, but it's work.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's like you grow, so then you have an opportunity to grow, so you grow some more.
Yeah, and it's it's that concept, because I think we've just been like, I mean, for me, I've got to where I'm at because of Instagram. I wouldn't be a freelance photographer if it wasn't for Instagram. I wouldn't be actually doing what I passionately love to do if it wasn't for the social media platform. But yes, it has changed within the last. If you were to tell me right now to sign up, I'd probably say hell no. I don't like this platform. It's just too, it's not for me. It was totally different. But it evolved as as money came into play.
Sure.
Once money came into play, it's like the whole system just got really more driven towards a money market system. It's like you want X amount. If I get X amount of people, X amount of numbers, I may get X amount of checks. Or X amount of opportunity. So I think that's the mentality when something new comes along.
It's really interesting to think about when you talk about money and critical mass and sort of the virtuous cycle and adoption, right? I mean, when you talk about Bitcoin and the amount of, I think estimates say that the number of people across the world that actually own Bitcoin. Have you guys seen what that number is?
Very little.
Yeah, the people assume that it's somewhere close to 50 million people. Right, 50 million, right? And there's been people like Andreas Antonopoulos to talk about like you can't really look at wallets and sort of distribution and all this. Like these aren't real measures of how many people are actually investing in the currency. But to Toots' point, like it's just it doesn't it's not going to mean anything as a platform until it becomes about until it hits a point of critical mass where you can actually use it and whether it be to buy your house or buy your coffee, whatever that is. So.
What do you view as the timeline for critical mass? I'm going to make you make wild predictions on camera.
I mean, I don't know. I think I have a couple of ideas in terms of like people just need to influencer marketing and even just crypto and blockchain in general. I think it really comes down to like what are the fundamental things where you're solving the most like inherent problems with decentralized ledgers, right? So like I think about the agency world a lot, right? Just from my background, it was a huge headache getting like as someone that's creating this stuff. It's a huge headache to say I've delivered it. It's a huge headache to say you haven't paid me for it. It's a huge headache to go out and try to find new work or even find creators, right? So for me, I look at opportunities in that sort of space as sort of the first thing. And I don't know. We'll see sort of where it goes. I wish I can call a top. I wish I could call a bottom. I wish I could sort of say like in 3 years we'll sort of be at a place where mass adoption is here. I don't know how to do that yet. But
I think this completely skipped my mind. I don't know. I'm just thinking about it from last 5 minutes. But another great example of using blockchain in influencer marketing could be, build something like Getty images for influencers. Like all the content that he produces, if he can put it on blockchain somewhere, like which is not owned by one company or whatever, and he has complete rights on that. Everybody knows that he's the owner of his content, and DRM's built around it. And then he can, from there, you can actually publish it on any of the social networks, and they link back to you because it is your content. I think that might be another.
I mean, there's music applications like that with like Mycelium and like there's certain things like whether it be soundtrack libraries or images or
There are people that are going and dabbling in non-fungible tokens to do exactly this, like digital art, put it on the blockchain, and make it tradable, right?
Right.
The biggest challenge still is adoption because the user interface and the user experience is so horrible.
Sure.
And so most people will not get onto these platforms easily.
Right.
And so it comes back full circle. It's like, look, until you start building out a stack, and you have a easy way of building good user experience, people aren't going to come onto those
Makes
platforms.
sense. Yeah, totally not. Yeah, totally. Okay.
What are your guys' thoughts on the recent launch of XRapid?
What about you? I have no idea.
I will not publicly comment.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off that. What do you guys think about thoughts on Swell? Swell?
I don't know. It's well.
Oh, by the way, nothing I've said tonight represents Stoic Capital. These are all my just like I'm issuing a disclaimer after the fact, which is the wrong way to do it, but I'm not going to.
That portion getting cut out of the street.
I only ask because you guys are talking about mass adoption. Doesn't Swell directly kind of talk about what that is?
Can you tell me, to be completely candid, I'm not that familiar with it. Can you tell me a little bit more?
Is anybody familiar with Swell in this room? So the guy that asked you guys that XRapid, the one guy that asked about XRapid is the one guy saying Swell. Does anyone find that coincidental?
Yeah.
It's not. It's not coincidental. Okay.
Okay.
Bill Clinton addressed the nation, probably the world today, at Swell.
It was a
Oh,
conference.
I
I saw the
XRP thing, okay.
At the same time, XRapid went live today, which is probably one of the most groundbreaking events of all time. You think the launch to space was big? This is big. That's an honest statement.
Is there a question? We're running out of time.
No. He asked me a question, I was answering it.
Okay.
Is that you asked, right? Am I correct?
Yeah, go ahead.
No. Okay. Sorry.
No, that's fine. We're running out of time, so
Just trying to bring awareness.
Sure.
But I find it crazy too that people don't know about
It's a big deal. I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm trying to bring string awareness. That's all. Please do your research.
No, people on my team are there.
I don't want to take the floor, just saying, waste of time.
Yeah.
People can hang out afterwards, when we're talking about it for sure. We do have to empty out the place by 8, and there's time to have some food and some drinks, so, you know, if there's one more question, we can do one more question.
Anybody else?
Cool, thank you guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Sorry, I need to just like start
No worries,
back on
no worries.
I'm getting excited.
There's also food
Hey Jeff.
and beverages, so.
Sir.
So you're active.
I know. Exactly. Let me talk about it.
This used to be BlockHack.
So I we logged up in bot, and then maybe yeah. I think and then you know.
We'll bounce that up. You don't have to. And then we'll grab some drinks. What do you guys think? Pretty interesting. You really look good.